Welcome to Seeking History. You know, did you know that the precise alignment of the Great Pyramid of Giza is actually said to relate to the star Sirius?
Hmm,
Or that some ancient cultures figured out constellations not from the bright stars we usually look for, but from the dark patches in the Milky Way?
that's fascinating, isn't it? Such different ways of seeing the same sky.
Exactly. For millennia, humanity has looked up. We've been drawn to the stars, and not just out of, well, curiosity. It seems more like a profound need.
A need to understand our place in the universe, maybe predict the future, even connect with the divine.
Right. So in this deep dive, we're going to explore exactly that. How different civilizations throughout history gazed at the night sky. What did they see?
And what did they believe they were seeing? How did those beliefs then shape their entire societies?
We're setting off on a pretty epic historical journey here. We'll start with the foundational astral science of Mesopotamia,
Then moving through the philosophical spheres of Greece,
the intricate calendars of Egypt and India,
China's meticulous observations,
then the incredible preservation and actually innovation during the Islamic Golden Age.
and finally, we can't forget the rich, holistic traditions of indigenous peoples around the world.
We'll try to uncover this fascinating interplay. You know, religion, philosophy, early scientific observation, how it all forged humanity's evolving understanding of the cosmos.
And how that celestial gaze was just deeply entwined with daily life, with how people governed, and even sometimes with their very survival.
It's truly remarkable, isn't it, how universal this human connection to the cosmos is.
Absolutely, but also how incredibly diverse the interpretations and applications were across different cultures and times.
As we journey through these historical perspectives, you'll see that things we now separate, like astronomy, astrology, religion, even agriculture,
They were once just inextricably linked, completely woven together.
serving practical needs, spiritual needs. This journey, I think, will really highlight how deeply societal needs and belief systems fundamentally shaped those earliest scientific pursuits.
And, in turn, shaped our foundational knowledge about the universe. It's a story of how we started to figure things out.
Okay, so our journey begins in ancient Mesopotamia. This is a land often called the cradle of astral science.
Mm-hmm.
And observing the heavens here, it wasn't just a hobby or some intellectual pursuit for the elite.
No, not at all. It was utterly essential, deeply interwoven with religious belief. It was a whole comprehensive system they called astral science.
It was basically the lens through which they understood reality.
Exactly. You see, all 5 planets visible to the naked eye, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, plus the moon and sun.
They knew all of them.
Oh, yes. They were known and meticulously observed, which raises the question, why such intense focus? Almost obsessive, you might say.
Right.
What was driving it?
The answer lies in their worldview. These celestial bodies weren't just distant points of light. They were revered as gods themselves.
At the very least, direct manifestations of powerful deities. Think about the planet Venus, for example.
Okay.
In Babylonia and Assyria, Venus was personified as the powerful goddess Ishtar.
Ishtar, I've heard of her.
She was hailed as the eldest of heaven and earth, embodied things like love, beauty, but also hunting and war. A really central figure, daughter of Anu, the god of heaven.
So understanding Venus's movements was like understanding Ishtar's intentions.
Precisely. This wasn't some abstract theology.
Mhm.
It provided a profound daily religious imperative for understanding the stars and their movements.
You can imagine the pressure on, say, a Mesopotamian priest king.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Knowing that the very success of his reign, whether the crops would flourish, whether an invasion would succeed, was believed to be foretold by Venus's movements.
Their astronomers were effectively the ultimate cosmic advisors then.
You could say that, yes.
Incredible. So it wasn't just abstract belief, but a real systematic drive for knowledge tied directly to governing and daily life.
It's exactly. From around 1800 BCE, Mesopotamians interpreted celestial movements as divine communications,
Messages from the gods.
signs or omens guiding human destiny, foretelling future events. This wasn't abstract science in our modern sense at all.
It was vital communication.
Vital communication with the divine, yes, and crucial for ensuring societal well-being. The pursuit of this knowledge was directly driven by their conviction that the gods shaped human destinies through these celestial signs.
Okay, so how did that drive for prediction actually translate into their scientific practice? What were they doing?
Well, that conviction led to truly remarkable advancements for the time. Babylonian scholars, particularly from about 600 BCE to 100 CE.
That's a long period of sustained observation.
It is. They maintained extensive astronomical diaries, and these weren't just casual notes.
No.
These were meticulous records of lunar and planetary phenomena, carefully etched onto clay tablets. Thousands of them have survived.
Wow. And their main goal was prediction.
Precise prediction. Not just what would happen, but when and where a celestial event would occur. They achieved this often using quite sophisticated goal year methods.
Goal year methods, how did that work?
Think of it like this. They didn't just guess. They observed celestial events for years, decades even, meticulously tracking the patterns.
Looking for cycles.
Exactly. They used these long-term records to predict when a planet would return to a specific position relative to the stars. It's like finding a hidden cosmic clockwork rhythm.
To predict future alignments with, what, surprising accuracy?
For the time, yes, astounding accuracy. Then, after the 5th century BCE, they introduced the zodiac.
Ah, the zodiac we still kind of know today.
The origins, yes.
Yeah.
Dividing the celestial sphere into 12 sections. And concurrently, they developed advanced mathematical astronomy.
Using math to predict the heavens.
Using arithmetic and geometry to enhance their predictive capabilities for lunar and planetary events. Eclipses, planetary positions, things like that.
So this blend of observation and math, that's the basis for astrology.
It formed the basis for horoscopy and other forms of astrology, yes, enabling them to forecast earthly occurrences and maybe even individual destinies based on celestial positions.
That's fascinating about the goal year methods. It really highlights their observational skill. We also know the oldest astrological omens date back to King Amisaduqa.
That's right, ruling around 1683 to 1647 BCE.
And these detailed records of Venus, its appearance, its disappearance, were crucial for interpreting omens and regulating the calendar.
Absolutely.
But their astronomical knowledge wasn't just for divination, was it? It had real-world practical applications, too, integrated into daily life.
Oh, absolutely. Their mathematical astronomy was directly applied in constructing these massive, multi-story ziggurat towers.
The ziggurats, right? Like Chogazanbil in Susa.
Exactly, often rising 7 floors high. These towering structures weren't just religious sites.
These were observatories, too.
Their rooftops served as dedicated observatories, platforms for astrologers and astronomers to conduct their celestial observations, not just for worship, but for serious, methodical sky watching.
Wow, so the architecture itself supported the science.
And even their calendars, primarily lunar-based like the early Sumerian one, weren't merely tools for timekeeping.
How so?
They were deeply embedded as both civil and religious institutions. Their very origin was attributed to the work of gods and goddesses.
So the calendar was divine.
Seen that way, yes. Advances in their understanding allowed astronomers to draw up almanacs that accurately noted eclipses, times of new and full moons, planetary positions throughout the year, using astrological charts.
So it's not just astronomy as we think of it.
No, it's this integrated astral science where astronomy, astrology, religion, they formed a completely cohesive system.
Driven by that profound belief in celestial influence.
And its undeniable impact on earthly affairs. It was, in a way, the science of predicting the will of the gods.
Okay, from the Fertile Crescent, let's shift our gaze southwest to ancient Egypt. Here we find a similarly deep belief in celestial influence, right?
Very much so. Astronomy was meticulously intertwined with religion, agriculture, and just, well, daily existence.
And their study of stars and planets, was it also driven by this desire to predict events and understand destiny?
Fundamentally, yes. Tying the heavens directly to the rhythm of life on Earth. The symbolism embedded in their astrological system truly formed the foundation of their religion, mythology, and culture.
Like Sirius, you mentioned Sirius earlier.
Exactly. Sirius, the brightest star in the night sky. It held immense significance, far beyond just being useful for navigation.
What did it represent?
It was believed to embody the very power behind the sun, to sustain both physical and spiritual life. And it was intrinsically linked to Isis.
Isis, the mother goddess.
The revered mother goddess of the earth, yes, a central figure. And the profound cosmological importance of Sirius is underscored by that potential link you mentioned earlier.
The alignment of the Great Pyramid of Giza.
Possibly relating to Sirius, yes. And the Egyptian zodiac itself, it was based on the concept of heliacal rising.
Helio rising. That's the first sighting of a star just before sunrise.
Precisely. The first sighting of specific constellations and stars on the eastern horizon just before dawn. A concept fundamental to their timekeeping.
It's fascinating how practical their celestial observations were. I mean, the Nile River's annual flooding.
Absolutely crucial for their survival. for agriculture.
And they thought that was regulated by celestial bodies, especially Sirius.
They did. This direct link between a critical environmental event and a celestial phenomenon really highlights the deep practicality behind their astronomical pursuits.
So how exactly did that connection drive their scientific endeavors?
Well, that's the crucial question, isn't it? The heliacal rising of Sirius coincided precisely with the Nile's annual flood.
Right when the flood began.
Exactly, marking the beginning of their new year and their agricultural season. Can you imagine living then, when the rising of a specific star literally meant the difference between feast or famine for your entire civilization?
That's a powerful incentive for precision.
An incredibly powerful incentive for meticulous star observation. It pushed them towards incredible accuracy. And this need led to the development of their remarkably accurate solar calendar.
The 365-day calendar.
Yes, a system so robust it was later adopted by the Greeks and Romans. It had 365 days, divided into 3 distinct seasons.
What were the seasons?
Akhet, the flooding season, Proye, for the emergence of the land after the flood, and Shomu, the season of low water or harvest.
Each 120 days.
Each 120 days, yes. Plus, they added 5 extra celebratory days at the end of the year.
A time for festivals.
Exactly. Egyptians refrained from labor and celebrated the birthdays of their ancient gods and goddesses during those 5 days.
How did they keep time at night?
They used decans, specific groups of stars. There were 36 decans, each spanning 10 days, which together accounted for a 360-day year.
And they had tools for this.
Oh, yes. They developed elaborate systems, sundials for the day, obviously, but also water clocks, sometimes called hourglasses, though they use water, and star clocks.
Star clocks.
Effectively diagrams, often found on tomb ceilings, showing the positions of these decans at different hours of the night. Very ingenious.
And they even adjusted the length of an hour.
They did. They divided the day into temporal hours that varied by season. Summer hours were longer than winter hours because of the longer daylight periods. Shows a really nuanced understanding of celestial mechanics.
That's an incredible level of detail and practical application. So it seems the pyramids, they weren't just grand tombs.
No, they likely served other functions too, possibly complex celestial observatories.
Their precise alignment with stars, like the North Star, indicates a deep understanding of astronomy.
And its religious significance, absolutely. We know detailed star charts were created too, maybe to aid navigation along the Nile River and help predict celestial events.
So what's the deeper significance of all this then? What does it tell us?
The profound implication is that this extensive astronomical knowledge wasn't a standalone academic thing. It was deeply embedded in their state and religious structures.
Serving multiple purposes.
Practical, spiritual, monumental purposes all at once. The alignment of pyramids with stars like Sirius, naming zodiac signs after deities, using the calendar for religious festivals.
It all points to astronomy being absolutely integral.
Integral to the functioning of their society and their belief system. It wasn't just about understanding the sky for its own sake.
It was about cosmic order.
Maintaining cosmic order, yes. Predicting agricultural cycles, vital for survival. And, importantly, legitimizing religious and political authority.
How so?
Their pharaohs were seen as divine intermediaries. Their ability to interpret, maybe even harness, celestial events reinforced their sacred power. Understanding the heavens was a form of power.
Okay, from the banks of the Nile, let's shift our gaze eastward now to the Indian subcontinent. Here we find a different, yet equally profound, connection between the heavens and human life taking root.
Yes, astronomy in India developed as a Vedanga. That's an auxiliary discipline to the study of the Vedas, the ancient scriptures.
With origins going way back.
As far back as 1500 BCE, maybe even earlier. And here, too, astronomy and religion were deeply intertwined. Early developments focused on the correct performance of religious rituals.
So getting the timing right for ceremonies was paramount.
Absolutely. For the early Indian civilizations, precise astronomical observation was utterly essential for the correct performance of rituals and sacrifices. These were believed to maintain cosmic harmony, Ma'at in Egypt, Robata here.
And this tied into other areas too, like mathematics.
Indeed. Texts like the Shulba Sutras, which focused on the intricate geometry needed for constructing altars.
Building altars required geometry.
Specific shapes and sizes were mandated. These texts discuss advanced mathematics and fundamental astronomical principles, showing how practical and theoretical knowledge were connected.
And what about specific astronomical texts?
The Vedanga Jyotisha is one of the earliest known Indian texts on astronomy. dated perhaps 1400, 1200 BCE, though the version we have might be later, maybe 700, 600 BCE.
And what did it contain?
It provided detailed information on the sun, moon, the nakshatras.
Nakshatras.
Mhm.
Those are the constellations.
Sort of, yes. More accurately, lunar mansions, or segments of the sky. The text also detailed the lunisolar calendar. It specifically outlined rules for tracking celestial motions for ritualistic purposes and included astronomical calculations.
So it shows a move beyond just ritual timing.
It shows a clear progression, moving from purely ritualistic timekeeping towards more sophisticated scientific explanations. Later developments began to understand the physical phenomena themselves, not just their timing.
That's a fascinating detail about the Shulba Sutras connecting altar building to astronomy. Now, you mentioned the nakshatras. They seem really central. Can you tell us more about these lunar mansions?
Of course, they are absolutely central to traditional Indian time reckoning. The nakshatras, or lunar mansions, each measure a specific arc of the ecliptic circle, 13 degrees and 20 minutes, precisely.
So they divide up the moon's path.
Essentially, yes. There are 27 or 28 of them, segments of the sky used to mark time by observing the moon's daily rising position during its monthly journey, and also the sun's monthly position. It's a unique system compared to the Western zodiac.
And the Hindu calendar itself.
It's a complex lunisolar system. Lunar months are defined by new and full moons, divided into 2 fortnights.
But how do they keep it aligned with the solar year?
By inserting an extra month, known as adimasa, approximately every 32.5 months. This harmonizes the lunar and solar cycles.
That demonstrates incredible observational and mathematical sophistication.
It really does,
Yeah.
balancing 2 different celestial cycles into one coherent calendar. But a truly pivotal figure in this story was Aryabhata.
Aryabhata, right, lived around 476 to 550 CE.
Yes, and he authored the groundbreaking Aryabhatya. In it, he explicitly stated that the Earth rotates on its axis.
Wow, that caused the apparent westward motion of the stars.
That's what he proposed. A significant departure from the prevailing geocentric beliefs common elsewhere at the time.
What else did he propose?
A spherical Earth. And he argued that the moon shines by reflected sunlight from the sun, challenging older notions.
And eclipses.
Crucially, Aryabhata provided scientific explanations for solar and lunar eclipses. He attributed them to shadows cast by and falling on Earth.
Not mythical demons like Rahu and Ketu.
Exactly. He moved away from the mythological interpretation towards physical explanations, which was a profound step towards modern scientific thought, even within a broader cultural context that still deeply embraced astrology.
That's truly revolutionary for his time, the Earth rotating on its axis. It makes you wonder about independent scientific discovery globally.
It certainly does.
Which brings us to a fascinating point, the question of Hellenistic or Greek influence on Indian astrology. Is it something that's debated?
Oh yes, it's debated. Was it a direct import from Greece or an independent development that perhaps interacted with Greek ideas later?
What does the evidence suggest?
Well, texts like the Yavanachaka from the 2nd century CE, translated from Greek, are considered the first Indian astrological treatise in Sanskrit. That certainly suggests transmission.
But it's not clear-cut.
No. The preservation of older, pre-Ptolemaic elements of Greek astronomy within Indian astrology, combined with distinct indigenous elements like the nakshatra system itself.
It points to something more complex.
A complex synthesis, maybe, or even parallel development. It probably wasn't a simple one-way street. Scientific progress, especially back then, is rarely just a simple transfer.
It's more about adaptation.
Adaptation, reinterpretation, a dynamic fusion with existing knowledge systems. Think of it like a cultural exchange. Ideas are received, then transformed, integrated into a new intellectual framework.
Creating something uniquely Indian in its expression.
Exactly. A rich tapestry of intellectual exchange.
Okay, our next stop on this historical journey takes us to ancient China. Here, engagement with celestial phenomena was also early and profound, identifying stars as early as 1300 BCE.
That's right. And Chinese star names were later categorized into the system of 28 mansions, or ZU.
We find references on oracle bones.
Yes, dating back to the mid-Shang dynasty, around that same early period. These 28 mansions are crucial to the Chinese constellation system. They serve a similar function to the Western zodiacal constellations.
But there's a key difference, isn't there?
A very important one. They uniquely reflect the moon's movement through a sidereal month that's its roughly 27.32-day journey against the background stars.
Not the sun's path through the year like the Western zodiac.
Exactly. This lunar emphasis allowed for precise tracking of the moon's daily position. The sky's ecliptic, the sun's apparent path, was further divided into 4 distinct regions.
The 4 symbols.
The 4 symbols, yes. The azure dragon in the east for spring, the black tortoise in the north for winter, the white tiger in the west for autumn, and the vermilion bird in the south for summer.
And each contained 7 mansions.
Each contains 7, totaling the 28 mansions. This system wasn't just for mapping the sky. It had deep cultural and practical significance for agricultural cycles, ritual timing, and even divination.
Before Western influences arrived, Chinese astronomy developed multiple cosmological models. It's really fascinating to explore the variety of their ideas about the universe's structure before encountering other systems.
It is. We see models like the Gaitian, the canopy heaven.
How did that work?
It described the sky as a kind of hemisphere or canopy, and the Earth as a flat disk at the bottom, maybe slightly domed, surrounded by water, rotating around the North Pole once a day.
Okay, and others.
There was the Huntian, the entire sky model. Similar, but it posited the sky as a full sphere, like an eggshell around the Earth yolk. Seasons were explained by a shifting North Pole relative to the observer.
But there was a more radical idea, too.
Yes, perhaps the most forward-thinking and strikingly modern for its time was the lesser-known Xunye school.
What did they propose?
Unlike the prevalent models of fixed spheres or canopies, this school proposed a truly radical idea that the heavens were infinite, empty space.
Infinite. With stars just floating.
With celestial bodies floating independently, their speed determined by their individual natures, or chi. This wasn't just a different shape for the cosmos, it was a profound intellectual leap.
Suggesting a universe of dynamic, self-governing entities.
A philosophical precursor to ideas that wouldn't really take hold in the West for many centuries.
That's a truly remarkable conceptual leap. Given these varied models, how did detailed astronomical observations then flourish, especially regarding phenomena like guest stars?
Detailed observations did indeed flourish, especially from the Warring States period, starting around the 4th century BCE onwards. Chinese astronomers paid incredibly close attention to guest stars.
These were supernovae. Comment.
Typically transient celestial events like supernovae or comets that suddenly appeared among the fixed stars. These observations were absolutely crucial for astrological divination, because celestial events were seen as direct indicators of cosmic approval or disapproval of the ruler. It was a matter of imperial legitimacy.
So a new star could be a very bad sign. Or a good one.
Potentially, yes. A notable example is the supernova that formed the Crab Nebula in 1054 CE.
That was recorded by Chinese astronomers.
Meticulously recorded, a testament to their observational rigor. And their meticulousness wasn't just for divination. It led to compiling extensive star catalogs.
Among the best in the world at the time.
Arguably, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Zhang Heng, for instance, who lived from 78 to 139 CE, cataloged about 2,500 different stars and identified over 100 constellations.
And the Dunhuang Star Atlas.
Ah, yes, the Dunhuang Star Atlas, dating to around 700 CE. It stands as the oldest known complete star map from any civilization.
Showing thousands of stars.
It showcases the 345 stars across 257 asterisms, or star patterns, with a remarkable accuracy for a hand-drawn document from that era.
That's an astonishing achievement for 700 CE. It sounds like Chinese astronomy was fundamentally linked to this concept of the celestial mandate.
Absolutely. The idea that celestial phenomena directly reflected the legitimacy and well-being of the ruling emperor and the state.
So astronomy was a matter of state security.
Precisely. It was considered a matter of supreme state importance, not just an academic pursuit. Astronomical documents like the Dunhuang Star Atlas were strictly controlled.
Limited to military and government use.
Yes, emphasizing their strategic value. The celestial North Pole, seen as representing the emperor surrounded by his royal court, was considered the most important part of the cosmos in Chinese astrology. The imperial connection was explicit.
So accuracy was politically vital.
Astronomical accuracy and correct interpretation were vital tools of statecraft and political stability. An inaccurate prediction or misinterpreted omen could have severe political consequences.
And they looked at clouds, too.
Yes. The Dunhuang Star Atlas even includes a manual for cloud divination, or uranomancy, interpreting cloud shapes to predict future events. Shows the pervasive role of divination in state affairs.
So the lunar emphasis, the agricultural connection, the practical timekeeping.
Especially with the 28 lunar mansions for determining lunar months and predicting intercalary months. It all reflects a highly functional observational approach to celestial mechanics.
Primarily for societal benefit and imperial stability.
Exactly.
Okay, let's pivot westward again now, to the ancient Greeks and Romans. They approached cosmology with a perhaps more distinct emphasis on philosophical reasoning and geometric constructs, didn't they?
Yes, their approach was often more about constructing a rational, explainable universe, seeking to explain the apparent motions of celestial bodies through systematic logical models.
So the idea of celestial spheres emerged early.
Quite early, Anaximander, back in the early 6th century BC, proposed the sun, moon, and stars were open vents and tubular rings of fire enclosed in tubes of condensed air.
A bold idea.
A bold, if ultimately incorrect vision, yes. Anaximenes, his student, later posited that stars were fastened onto a revolving crystal sphere.
And that idea stuck around.
Remarkably, yes. It persisted in various forms until the time of Copernicus and Kepler, influencing Western thought for nearly 2 millennia. Later philosophers like Pythagoras, Xenophanes, Parmenides, they all maintained the universe was spherical. That became a core assumption.
And Plato.
Plato, in his 4th century BC work, Timaeus, further proposed a spherical cosmos. It contained fixed stars, with planets set in rotating bands or rings. These weren't just abstract ideas. They were attempts to create a coherent, logical system for the heavens.
So it seems these early philosophical ideas about spheres eventually culminated in Aristotle's comprehensive geocentric model, building on earlier ideas.
Exactly. Aristotle built upon these insights, especially Plato's, to develop a truly influential physical cosmology. His student, Eudoxus, had already developed a planetary model using concentric spheres.
How many spheres?
Eudoxus assigned 3 spheres each to the moon and sun and 4 to the other 5 planets. That's 26 spheres in total. Clovis later modified this system to 33 spheres, trying to improve its accuracy.
But they weren't perfect models.
They qualitatively described planetary motion, but they lacked quantitative predictive accuracy. Aristotle, in his Metaphysics, expanded on Eudoxus's mathematical models to create a truly physical cosmology.
So what did Aristotle's fully developed model look like?
The spherical Earth was absolutely at the center of the universe. Planets were moved by either 47 or 55 interconnected, concentric crystalline spheres, forming a unified planetary system.
Crystalline spheres. Made of what?
They were thought to be made of an unchanging fifth element, ether, distinct from the 4 earthly elements of earth, water, air, and fire.
And what moved them all?
The outermost sphere was believed to be the domain of the prime mover. This imparted motion to the entire system, like a divine engine.
But this model had problems too, right?
Despite its comprehensiveness and philosophical elegance, yes, it struggled to explain 2 significant observed phenomena.
Which were?
The varying brightness of planets, because objects attached to these fixed spheres would always remain at the same distance from Earth.
And the other?
Their retrograde motion. That apparent backward loop planets make against the background stars. Objects on these spheres should move with constant angular velocity in a single direction.
That sounds like a major conceptual problem, trying to make observations fit the model.
It was.
Which brings us to an incredibly ingenious, though maybe overly complex solution. Ptolemy, around 150 AD.
Yes, Claudius Ptolemy.
Yeah.
He developed an even more elaborate geocentric model using epicycles, detailed in his foundational work, the Almagest.
Epicycles. Can you explain how those worked to solve Aristotle's problems, like retrograde motion?
Indeed. Ptolemy's solution was a marvel of mathematical ingenuity for its time, designed to preserve the geocentric ideal while accounting for these observed anomalies.
So planets weren't directly on the big spheres.
No. Instead of being directly attached to the large concentric spheres, called deferents, planets were placed on smaller circles known as epicycles.
Like wheels on wheels.
Exactly like wheels on wheels. These smaller epicycles were themselves attached to the deferents, both the epicycle and the different executed uniform circular motion.
And the effect of that.
The net effect, as viewed from Earth, was that a planet could appear to move backward on the celestial sphere. That explained retrograde motion.
And the varying brightness.
The planet's movement on the epicycle meant its distance from Earth would vary, closer on one part of the epicycle, farther on another. That accounted for the observed variations in brightness.
It sounds incredibly complex.
It became even more so. More sophisticated versions included epicycles on epicycles, or displacing the center of the deferent, or using points called equants to regulate speed, all to achieve greater accuracy.
But it was all built on ideas later proven wrong.
Exactly. This model, while brilliantly complex, was built upon 3 deeply ingrained ideas: that all motion in the heavens is uniform and circular, that celestial objects are made from perfect, unchanging material, ether, and that the Earth is immovably at the center of the universe.
It sounds like Ptolemy was almost bending over backward to make the observations fit the geocentric model, rather than questioning the model itself.
That's a very good way to put it.
So what's the key takeaway here about this increasing complexity, from Eudoxus to Ptolemy? And what happens when scientific theories get tangled up with broader societal beliefs, like religion?
You've hit on a crucial point. This increasing complexity wasn't about rejecting the geocentric view or uniform circular motion. It was about making observations fit deeply held philosophical principles, a preference for theoretical elegance over direct empirical challenges.
And the connection to religion.
That's where it becomes truly impactful, especially later. The integration of Aristotle's cosmology with medieval theology, notably by influential figures like Thomas Aquinas.
That solidified the geocentric model even further.
Absolutely. Aristotle's prime mover was identified with the Christian God. The outermost sphere became Christian heaven. The Earth's central position was interpreted as reflecting God's special concern for humanity, our unique place in creation.
So questioning the model became dangerous.
It became not just a scientific challenge, but a theological transgression, a challenge to divine order itself. This made it a dangerous proposition, subjecting dissenters to the Church's power.
It really highlights how scientific theories can become so deeply embedded in society and religion.
That they create significant, even dangerous resistance to change, regardless of accumulating evidence to the contrary.
Okay, as we move into the early Middle Ages in Western Europe, say AD 476 to 1000, after the Western Roman Empire collapses, we hit a period often labeled the Dark Ages, at least in terms of scientific advancement.
Yes, that label is common, though maybe a bit simplistic. But there was definitely a significant decline, especially regarding access to classical Greek knowledge.
How so? What happened?
What's striking is how the loss of Greek scientific literature, the ability to read Greek, really significantly cut Western Europe off from its rich Greek philosophical and scientific roots.
So the original detailed texts were lost or unreadable?
For the most part, yes. Most classical scientific treatises in Greek became unavailable. Scholars had to rely on simplified Latin summaries and compilations. Roman writers like Chalcidius, Macrobius, Marcianus Capella, Boethius Cassiodorus, their works became the main sources.
Which led to a decline in the depth of understanding.
Indeed. The depth and breadth of classical learning dwindled in many areas.
So it seems this scientific decline was a direct consequence of massive societal upheaval. The fall of Rome, deurbanization, instability.
Absolutely. Those societal shifts severely limited access to advanced knowledge. And they fundamentally shifted the purpose of scientific inquiry.
From abstract pursuit
to immediate practical and religious utility. Education primarily shifted to monastic and cathedral schools by the 6th century. Leading scholars were mostly clergymen. For many, the disinterested study of nature wasn't a primary interest. There was little institutional support for pursuing knowledge of nature for its own sake.
So any study of nature was driven by specific needs.
Very specific practical or religious needs. For instance, monks needed to determine the proper time for prayer throughout the day and night.
Which required looking at the stars.
It prompted them to study the motion of the stars and the moon. Similarly, the crucial and complex task of calculating the correct date of Easter.
Ah, the computus.
Exactly. That necessitated rudimentary mathematics and a precise understanding of the sun and moon's motions over long cycles. This prioritization of survival, religious order, basic functionality.
Over theoretical advancement.
It starkly illustrates how profound societal conditions dictate the nature and scope of scientific activity. It was about what was immediately useful, not necessarily about pushing the boundaries of cosmic understanding.
It's easy to paint this period as a complete intellectual void, though. But despite this decline, it actually laid crucial groundwork for later recovery, didn't it? It wasn't a total blank slate.
Absolutely not. That's a crucial point. While there was a decline in certain areas, Roman and early medieval scientific texts, even if simplified, were consistently read and studied.
So there was continuity.
Vital intellectual continuity. Think of it like keeping a small fire burning so it could be rekindled later. The Carolingian Renaissance, initiated by Charlemagne around 800 AD, for example.
What did that do?
It actively promoted the study and teaching of astronomy, recognized its importance for both practical clerical needs, like the computus, and theoretical understanding.
So preserving knowledge.
Yes. This period saw the preservation of manuscripts, the establishment of scriptoria, where monks painstakingly copied and disseminated what knowledge remained. This active study and investigation of ancient Roman scientific texts provided the intellectual continuity,
And the foundation for later scholars.
the foundational knowledge base necessary for later Western scholars to recover and translate more comprehensive ancient Greek texts, often reintroduced via the Arab world.
So this continuity directly contributed to the later Middle Ages and the Renaissance.
Correctly. It demonstrates that even periods of perceived decline can be vital for the long-term trajectory of knowledge, acting as a crucial bridge, not an empty gap.
Now, in stark contrast to Western Europe during this time, the medieval Islamic world emerged as this pivotal center for astronomical knowledge.
A truly pivotal center, yeah.
Not just preserving, but significantly building upon ancient Greek, Iranian, and Indian sources. This period feels like a vibrant intellectual explosion.
It absolutely was. What's truly remarkable is how Baghdad, especially under the visionary Abbasid caliphs like al-Mansur, particularly al-Mamun in the 9th century,
Became this incredible hub.
an unparalleled hub for astronomical study. Extensive translation programs were a hallmark of this era, a conscious, monumental effort.
Translating texts from Greek, Sanskrit.
Greek, Sanskrit, Pahlavi, Middle Persian, astronomical texts, translating them into Arabic. This was a critical endeavor that preserved vast amounts of ancient knowledge that might otherwise have simply vanished.
Like Ptolemy's Almagest?
Exactly. The Almagest, a comprehensive treatise on celestial motions, became a foundational text for Islamic astronomers. It deeply influenced their work for centuries. This dedication to translation was a deliberate act of cultural and intellectual synthesis.
That's incredible. A true act of preserving human knowledge on a massive scale. And from that foundation, observational astronomy really flourished.
It really did, leading to the development of sophisticated observatories and instruments that pushed the boundaries of accuracy.
Can you give us some specific examples?
Well, Caliph al-Mamun, for instance, established the first systematic, state-sponsored observatory in Baghdad in the 9th century.
A dedicated space for astronomers.
Yes, to create new star catalogs, new tables of celestial motions. Later, other major observatories, like in Samarkand under Ulu Beg and Moraga under Nasir al-Din al-Tusi.
Achieved remarkable accuracy.
Truly remarkable accuracy. Their calculations for things like the length of the year or the precession of the equinoxes show only fractional differences from figures we accept today. Revolutionary precision for the time.
And they developed new instruments, too.
Yes, alongside large stationary instruments like Miro quadrants and armillary spheres, they refined and developed portable tools. The most famous is probably the astrolabe.
The astrolabe, right. What could it do?
It was an incredibly versatile device, used for mapping, determining time by the sun or stars, measuring altitudes, performing complex astronomical and astrological calculations. They also created astrolabic quadrants, celestial globes.
And these tools spread.
These innovative tools weren't just for their own use. They eventually made their way to Renaissance Europe, profoundly influencing European instrument makers and scientists. They acted as a direct conduit for advanced observational techniques.
So it's clear Islamic astronomers didn't just preserve, they actively criticized and refined Ptolemy's models too.
Definitely. They moved well beyond simply being custodians of ancient knowledge. Through their own meticulous observations, they identified discrepancies.
Differences between the models and reality.
Exactly. Which prompted them to develop new theories about celestial bodies and planetary motion. Figures like Abd al-Rahman al-Sufi in the 10th century.
What did he do?
He described 48 constellations of fixed stars in his book of the Images of the Fixed Stars, based on new observations made in Isfahan, Iran, directly refining earlier catalogs like Ptolemy's. He even noted the Andromeda galaxy, describing it as a little cloud.
Wow, and others.
Scholars like al-Biruni in the 11th century and Nasir al-Din al-Tusi at the Moraga Observatory in the 13th century made significant contributions. Al-Tusi, for instance, developed the Tusi couple, a geometrical device to explain linear motion from circular motions, which some think might have influenced Copernicus. They also authored significant astrological treatises, showing the continued intertwining of astronomy and astrology.
So what really drove this incredible period of innovation? You mentioned the practical needs of Islam earlier.
That's the fascinating interplay, yes. The precise ritual requirements of Islam directly spurred much of this advancement.
Like determining prayer times.
Exactly. The necessity of accurately determining the time for the 5 daily prayers, and crucially, the direction of Mecca, the Qibla, from any location.
That requires sophisticated astronomy and geography.
It does. Also, determining the exact moments of sunrise and sunset for fasting during Ramadan. These created a strong, practical, and religious imperative for astronomical precision.
So the need for empirical accuracy in religious practice.
Inadvertently fostered significant scientific progress. It led to developing sophisticated observatories, innovative instruments, refining celestial models. It was a beautiful, powerful synergy between faith and science.
This period truly acted as that crucial intellectual bridge between classical antiquity and the European Renaissance, far more than just a placeholder.
It absolutely was a dynamic bridge. It didn't just passively preserve ancient knowledge. It actively innovated upon it, refined it, and then transmitted it to later European scholarship.
But translations were the start.
The extensive translation of Sanskrit, Pahlavi, and Greek studies into Arabic highlights their initial role in safeguarding classical texts. But crucially, they didn't just act as custodians.
The updated methods.
They updated methods for measuring and calculating the movement of heavenly bodies and continued to develop models of the universe. The observatories, the astrolabe reaching Europe, it shows their active role in both advancing and transmitting knowledge.
So it really refutes that idea of a simple, dark age between classical antiquity and the European Renaissance.
Thoroughly refutes it. It reveals a vibrant period of scientific activity that was utterly fundamental to the subsequent European scientific revolution. Without the Islamic Golden Age, Europe's scientific reawakening would likely have been far slower, perhaps fundamentally different.
Okay, as we transition now to the later medieval period in Europe, say, starting with the reemergence of urban society around the 12th century, we see another significant shift in the study of astronomy.
We do. Moving beyond the primarily monastic settings we discussed earlier.
So what characterized this reemergence? Where was astronomy studied now?
What's particularly fascinating here is the distinct transition of astronomical study from its main home in monasteries and cathedrals to the newly emerging universities.
Universities like Paris, Oxford, Bologna.
Exactly. This institutional change brought a renewed emphasis on the quantitative aspects of astronomy and geometry. It was largely driven by the recovery and eager study of ancient texts.
Especially Ptolemy's works, often coming via those Arabic translations.
Precisely. Astronomy evolved during this time. It moved beyond just simple ritual computations like the computus. It began integrating quantitative observations with trigonometrically computed tables derived from geometrical models like Ptolemy's.
A significant departure from the earlier medieval approach.
A departure from the more bookish astronomy, focused on summaries, that was prevalent in the early Middle Ages. It became a more systematic, mathematically driven pursuit within these new academic centers.
So the shift of astronomical study to universities like the University of Paris in the 13th and 14th centuries, that signifies a crucial step towards institutionalizing science.
Yes, institutionalization and specialization of scientific inquiry. In the early Middle Ages, astronomical study was practical, embedded in monastic life, focused on immediate needs.
But the 12th century saw changes.
A reemergence of urban society, increased trade, travel, a general intellectual ferment. This all facilitated the establishment of universities.
And astronomy became a formal subject.
These new academic centers, like Paris, became important hubs where masters formally taught astronomy as part of the quadrivium.
The quadrivium, that was arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy.
The higher division of the 7 liberal arts, yes. This institutionalization meant astronomy evolved into a recognized academic discipline. It fostered a more rigorous, quantitative approach based on ancient texts and increasingly new observations and calculations.
Laying the groundwork for the future.
Laying the groundwork for the more structured scientific research environments that would characterize the Renaissance and beyond. By the 13th century, observing instruments and sophisticated mechanical clocks.
Mechanical clocks were becoming more common.
Yes, and some even incorporated a geometrical picture of the cosmos. These became integral to timekeeping traditions within these burgeoning academic and urban centers.
One detail that really stands out from this later medieval period is the widespread use of zodiac iconography in art, in architecture.
Yes, that's quite striking.
This wasn't just decorative, was it? It seems like it served a deeper purpose in society. What was it communicating?
It indicates a deliberate and fascinating effort to communicate complex cosmological understanding to a broader, largely illiterate populace.
How so?
The movement of the sun through the zodiac signs and its direct relation to human activities, particularly the agricultural cycle, became a common theme in medieval artistic depictions.
Found in manuscripts.
In intricate manuscript illustrations, yes, but also very prominently in grand architectural decoration on cathedrals.
Can you give an example?
Prominent examples include the beautiful 12th century sculptural decoration on the arches of the west facade of Chartres Cathedral. It depicts the signs of the zodiac alongside the associated labors of the month.
Labors of the month, like farming tasks.
Exactly. Plowing, sowing, harvesting, slaughtering animals. A visual calendar of the agricultural year tied directly to the sun's position in the zodiac. Similar patterns are seen at Strasbourg Cathedral, the baptistry of Parma.
And these sculptures were like textbooks for the illiterate.
They're widely believed to have functioned that way, yes. A deliberate strategy to disseminate cosmological knowledge, to illustrate the intrinsic relationship between human activities on Earth and the rhythms of the heavens, to a public beyond scholarly circles.
It really highlights the deep cultural integration of astronomical ideas.
Even in an era before widespread literacy, it proves that understanding the cosmos, or at least its perceived connection to life, was a fundamental part of the medieval worldview for everyone, not just scholars.
Our exploration wouldn't be complete without examining indigenous perspectives. These often offer profoundly different ways of relating to the cosmos. Let's start with Aboriginal Australian astronomy.
And it's crucial to remember, as you said earlier, this isn't one single tradition. It's a rich diversity across hundreds of language groups and regions of Australia.
So, what's fundamentally distinguishing about many Aboriginal Australian traditions? You mentioned the dark patches earlier.
Yes, that's perhaps the most striking difference from European traditions, which tend to focus on patterns of bright stars. Many First Peoples traditions give prominence to dark nebulae.
The dark patches in the sky, like the coal sack near the Southern Cross?
Exactly. Imagine trying to find shapes not in the stars themselves, but in the absence of light, like seeing the silhouette of an animal against the bright background of the Milky Way.
That requires a different kind of seeing.
An incredibly keen eye and a unique way of interpreting the celestial canvas. It's a sophisticated observational paradigm in its own right. The colors of stars also hold significant importance in their interpretations.
And their constellations aren't always figures.
Often formed based on abstract relationships between stars rather than just connecting dots to make pictures. And a common cosmological belief across almost all First Peoples groups is seeing the sun as a woman and the moon as a man.
Reflecting a deep gendered connection to the celestial bodies. That concept of constellations formed from dark spaces is truly mind-bending. It sounds like star myths and constellations are deeply embedded in their stories, songs, dances.
Absolutely. And often directly informing subsistence practices, showing a profound, practical connection between the heavens and the land.
Can you give us some specific examples of this?
Certainly. For example, the Burong people of northwest Victoria have stories like Werepil, the male wedge-tailed eagles centered around Sirius,
The brightest star.
whose movements indicated when eagle eggs or chicks might be available. Kolkumbula represents two young dancing men, found in what we call the Belt and Sword of Orion.
Okay.
And Uri and Wanjil, the bright stars, Castor and Pollux, are seen as two hunters pursuing Pura the kangaroo. Their position would tell the Burong when kangaroo meat was plentiful.
And the dark constellations?
Chingal, seen as an evil emu, is formed by a series of dark nebulae, with its head being the Coalsack Nebula next to the Southern Cross.
But the most famous is the emu in the sky.
Perhaps the most widely known example, yes. Gaurge, the emu in the sky, formed entirely by the dark spaces between the stars in the Milky Way, as understood by the ULI people and many others.
And its appearance meant something specific.
Its appearance, its orientation in the sky throughout the year, directly indicates emu behavior mating seasons, egg-laying seasons. This demonstrates a profound ecological understanding intrinsically linked to the cosmos.
Not just abstract timekeeping.
No, information vital for survival, for managing resources, for maintaining the health of the country, their traditional lands. The Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, for instance.
Near Melbourne.
Yes. They define 7 distinct seasons, not 4, linked to natural phenomena like plant flowering, animal behavior, and celestial observations.
Like the eel season.
Like Eok, the eel season, marked by the migration of short-finned eels in the Yarra River, but also by the highest position of the star Canopus when it's due south. This prominence of dark nebulae as constellations is unique.
And requires keen skills.
Identifying patterns in the absence of light highlights a distinct cultural and cognitive approach to mapping the cosmos, deeply integrated with their environment.
So it's clear their celestial observations were deeply tied to land and subsistence. You mentioned navigation earlier. Stars weren't primary for overland travel.
Generally not. Aboriginal people's overland navigation skills were highly developed, relying on intricate knowledge of landmarks, water sources, wind direction, animal tracks usually utilized during the day.
But there was an important exception for sea travel.
Yes, that's correct. While land knowledge was paramount for daily travel in northern Australia, particularly among coastal and island communities like the Torres Strait Islanders,
They used stars for navigation.
some societies developed sophisticated astronomical traditions specifically for marine navigation. They used the stars, sun, moon, and even wave patterns guided by wind and stars to guide their voyages across vast stretches of water, demonstrating mastery of celestial navigation when it was absolutely crucial for long-distance travel, trade, and connection.
Finally, let's turn to Native American astronomical knowledge, which we understand through a rich combination of sources, right?
Yes, historical accounts from early contact, ethnographic reports from anthropologists, archaeological sites showing alignments, rock art depictions, and importantly, living traditions passed down through generations, all painting a complex picture of their celestial wisdom.
And they developed timekeeping systems, too.
Many Native American groups developed intricate time-reckoning systems based on recurrent celestial phenomena, primarily utilizing lunar calendars.
Tracking the moon's phases.
Observations of moon phases were often instrumental in shifting to continuous time reckoning, allowing for more consistent tracking of time for ceremonies, planting, hunting, and daily life.
And they used structures, too, like the Egyptians.
Some groups employed natural landmarks or constructed specific structures, like houses with specific post or hole arrangements or large earthworks or standing stones to fix the solstitial sunrise or sunset points on the horizon.
Functioning as rudimentary solar calendars.
Effectively, yes, demonstrating incredible ingenuity in their celestial observations, often incorporating their architecture or landscape directly into their astronomical tools. Think of places like Cahokia's Woodhenge or the Bighorn Medicine Wheel.
That's a clever way to mark time. One common thread across diverse Native American groups seems to be the direct application of astronomical observations for agricultural planning and seasonal timing.
Yes, that practical dimension is very strong, driven by fundamental human needs.
So how did they use specific celestial events for this? What were they looking for?
Well, the fundamental question was often, when do we plant? When do we harvest? When do the animals migrate? The consistent mention across many cultures of the heliacal rising,
That first visible rising before dawn again.
of constellations like the Pleiades or Orion, is often served to mark the beginning of the year for many groups, or signal important seasonal activities.
Like planting time.
For example, in many agricultural communities in North and South America, the heliacal rising of the Pleiades signaled the rainy season and the crucial need to begin clearing land for planting crops like maize.
Or harvesting.
Similarly, the stars of Orion might mark the manioc season in parts of South America, indicating the time for harvesting this staple crop. It directly links celestial phenomena to agricultural cycles, driven by the fundamental need for food security.
What other stars were commonly observed?
Other known stars observed, for instance in Amazonia, included Sirius, Aldebaran, Capella, Castor and Pollux, the stars of Auriga, the Southern Cross, Scorpio, and Centaurus, all integrated into their understanding of the season's environment.
So the presence of specialized timekeepers or stargazers, that indicates that while celestial knowledge might have been widespread, its precise application was often held by a select few.
That seems to be the case in many societies. These individuals, often elders respected for their wisdom or priests or shamans,
They were responsible for sky watching.
responsible for detailed sky watching, making anticipatory observations to forecast ceremonial dates accurately or advise on planting times. This suggests astronomical observation wasn't just a casual activity,
It was a specialized skill.
often linked to religious or community leadership, implying that this celestial knowledge conferred significant social status and played a crucial role in governance or ritual leadership within their societies. It gave them the authority to guide their communities.
And they observed twinkling, too.
On a global scale, yes, many indigenous peoples observed stellar scintillation, the twinkling of stars, to predict weather and seasonal change.
How did that work?
For instance, in Yupik traditions of Alaska, the flickering or color changes of Sirius were interpreted as a signal for strong winds or approaching storms, showing yet another practical application of keen celestial observation going beyond simple timekeeping into weather forecasting.
Well, as we wrap up this deep dive, it's just abundantly clear that across all these ancient and medieval civilizations, the stars were so much more than distant lights.
So much more. They were absolutely integral to religious belief, philosophical inquiry, practical survival, societal organization. profoundly shaping human existence in countless ways.
It's truly fascinating to see that recurring theme, isn't it? The deep intertwining of astronomy with everything else.
Religion, astrology, agriculture, governance.
Mm-hmm.
The boundaries were often fluid or non-existent in those early periods. Humanity consistently sought meaning and utility in the heavens.
From Mesopotamia's divine omens guiding kings,
To Egypt's calendrical precision rooted in the Nile's vital cycles.
India's ritualistic astronomy for cosmic harmony,
China's celestial mandate for imperial legitimacy.
Greece's philosophical spheres seeking rational order,
The Islamic world's critical bridging and innovations.
and Europe's practical computus for spiritual observance, eventually leading back to more theoretical work.
And the holistic, practical knowledge of indigenous peoples worldwide.
So what's the key takeaway about the trajectory of this understanding over this vast period?
Well, while mythological and religious interpretations remained incredibly potent, you can see a discernible trend, maybe not always linear, but definitely there, towards more systematic observation and mathematical modeling in many cultures.
The development of sophisticated calendars.
Detailed star charts, increasingly complex predictive tools like Ptolemy's epicycles or Aryabha's calculations, or the incredibly accurate tables from Islamic observatories.
It demonstrates a growing emphasis on empirical accuracy.
On empirical accuracy and quantitative understanding, yes. Powerful.
Ultimately, all these historical views of the stars, they laid the foundational groundwork, didn't they? Intellectually, observationally.
For modern astronomy, yes. These ancient and medieval insights, though often rooted in cosmologies vastly different from our own, represent humanity's persistent, enduring quest to comprehend our place in the universe.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it reminds us that scientific progress isn't just one straight line.
No, it's a cumulative, cross-cultural endeavor, shaped by incredibly diverse motivations, from divine reverence to the stark practical necessity of knowing when to plant your crops.
The journey from interpreting stars as direct divine messages to understanding them through complex mathematical models
Reflects a profound millennia-long evolution in human thought, showcasing our remarkable capacity for observation, ingenuity, and intellectual growth.
And that underlying curiosity, that desire to connect with the cosmos, that seems to be the constant thread running through all of history, binding us to everyone who came before.
It really does.
So perhaps the next time you look up at the night sky, you might consider not just what you see, but what countless generations before us saw, what they believed, and what they built their worlds upon.
Makes you wonder, what new connections might you discover between the cosmos and our lives today?